Hey guys, it's Carl here. The topic I want to talk about today is how I prepare for behavioral questions. And before we jump in, I want to mention that I make a lot of English contents that's related to career and interviews. So if you're interested in these type of contents and topics, consider following me for future videos. And the reason I want to make this video is because behavioral questions is actually such an important part of pretty much any interviews, at least in North America. And I think this is going to be super helpful for people that's on job search. Now, what is behavioral questions? So by definition, behavioral interviews are designed to assess how you behaved in the past in certain situations to predict how you might behave in future similar scenarios. And the question prompts are usually like, tell me about a time you do certain stuff and describe a scenario where you blah, 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 or give me an example where you do certain stuff. And the specific context could be like a time you resolved a certain conflict with your teammates, with your boss, a time you fail, a time you're involved in a very complex project, things like that. First of all, I want to mention two very common misconceptions people have. And the first one here is that some people treat behavioral questions like a casual chat. They'd be like, okay, this is something I have done in the past anyways. I know what I have done. So I just chat with the interviewer, I make it chill and relax, I talk it through. But in reality, what happened is people usually get nervous. When you're getting into this casual chatting mode, you're probably just gonna talk whatever that's off the top of your head. You don't follow a clear logic. And everything here is just gonna make it very hard for the other person to follow you sometimes. Especially in an interview, you wanna talk about and highlight what the interviewer cares about the most. And that's why you should, or at least it's always better to prepare for it. And that is why people recommend the START method, which is so popular, everyone knows about it, which I'm not gonna dive too much into. And then the second misconception here is when some people are interviewing, they tend to categorize different questions. It's like they're expecting for the first 5 to 10 minutes, they're gonna be asked all those basic questions such as tell me about yourself, why this company, why this role, and some admin questions such as where you're located, do you need sponsorship, what's your salary expectations, how soon can you start, things like that. And then after that, they kind of expect, okay, now the behavioral questions should be coming. Whereas in reality, in real interviews, there's a blurry line between these questions. People can merge the behavioral questions into the so-called basic question part, where they could be asking like, even just right after they ask you, tell me about yourself, they can be like, hey, we're a fast-paced environment. Are you able to handle stress? Right? These type of questions don't really have a clear indication that they are behavioral questions because they didn't start with tell me about a time or describe a scenario. But in fact, they're not looking for a yes or no answer, right? You cannot just say, yes, I am able to handle stress. Like that's not what they're looking for. You're gonna provide an example to elaborate, to really showcase what you said is true. And that is sort of like a behavioral question as well. You shouldn't be expecting behavioral questions to happen in a certain part of the interview. Instead, you should always be ready for it. And then I want to talk about the approach I personally take, which has 3 steps. So the first step here is doing research, particularly on the company culture and vision. And this information is usually publicly available, where you can find on the company's website, their LinkedIn page, and something has an Instagram page. Make sure when you're doing the interview prepping, you read these things through because these things really signify what the company cares about the most. And then on the other hand, for smaller companies, the culture stuff might be harder to find, or some of them might be even non-existent. And what I would personally do there is I'll search their founder's name, I'll search their company, like a high up manager, director from that company. I search those people's name on YouTube. Chances are I can find some interviews, some podcasts, and whatever videos that's related with those people. And then I try to catch a vibe in the way they talk. And that gives you a lot of information to work on to get a sense of what a culture is, what the company cares about the most. For example, some smaller companies, they might care about frugality. And accordingly, they might ask the behavioral questions such as, tell me about a time you have to work with limited resources where you don't have enough support, but you still have to get over this problem, you still have to solve this problem. And essentially these companies are looking for people that's able to solve a problem without spending that much money. And the second step here is to prepare the stories. And I personally usually just do like 3 to 4 stories where I use as the main storyline, and then I can kind of expand those things into different directions. And I'll give you one very specific example. So I have this data-driven project in the past. I can talk about from 0 to 1, from beginning to the end. In the starting phase, I'll be like, hey, there's this very ambiguous problem in my team and no one knows where to start. So I was doing a lot of investigation. And then in the middle of a project, I can talk about, okay, so there's this other stakeholders I reach out to, there's some cross-functional teams I was working with. And then in terms of the analysis, if the interviewer is looking for something technical, I can talk about how I approach this rigorous analysis, how I get very analytical and technical, how I deal with these data, how I reach to a conclusion, how I test my hypothesis. And then I can talk about the final part of this project where I was doing this presentation to these different senior stakeholders. From there, I can talk about some conflicts, right? Like there could be different ideas or conflicts coming from my audience. They can be like, hey, your analysis doesn't make sense. We don't want to do this. And then I can talk about how I approach those conversations, how I approach those conflicts. So this is why you only need 3 to 5 stories to prepare for pretty much every single behavioral questions, as long as you have this step 2 done correctly. And then the third step here is to go over the common behavioral questions and use those stories that you just prepared to practice those questions. You most likely, depending on what the questions are, you're telling those stories in different ways, which is the thing you want to practice on. And then you can find those questions from Google, from ChatGPT. It's actually just not that hard. And then several things I want to mention here. So first of all, don't make things up. When you're telling a story, I think it's actually okay to tweak a little details because, well, things happened a while ago, you probably don't even remember the detail anyways. But then if you're making things up, something you've never done from 0 to 1, well, trust me, it's really easy for people to find out. And the second thing here is you realize this is about you. Like you're the main character of the story that you're telling. So forget about being humble. I get it. A lot of times you're gonna have to tell some team project, team stories where you're just 1 out of 5 people. What I would do is I focus and I highlight only what I have done and my contribution. I think this is something you need to do because this is an interview. It's not about being humble. So there you have it. I hope this is helpful to your behavioral question prepping. And I wish you the best of luck in your job search. So if you like this video, please drop a like. And if you have any questions or thoughts, put it in the comments because I make sure I read every single comment. And also I want to mention that I know a lot of you follow me for my English content, but for now I'm probably going to pivot back a little bit to my career and interview related stuff because I feel like those are where my expertises are. But with that being said, for now, I'm still open to English-related requests or services. So if you're interested or want to have a chat, you know where to find me. And I'll see you guys next time.